Hello, this is Mr. Buffington, and we are going to be using transformations today. So we learned what they were. Now let's go ahead and actually use them to move objects around. Quick recap, isometric transformations. That's what we're going to be using. All of our translations will have congruent shapes at the beginning and at the end. So the angles, side measurements, and the size will remain the same. We will just be translating, rotating, and reflecting these objects. So let's take a look. What transformation shows that these figures are congruent? Or in other words, what would we do to kind of move these on top of each other? Notice when we're working with figures, you label them A and A prime. If you're naming the entire figure, you would just say that this is figure A, or object A, or rectangle A, and this is A prime, where we put that little mark there. In future questions, I'll actually be labeling each point around each vertex around the outside, and then you would label them in a similar way. Any vertex A would be vertex A prime with the corresponding side. Anyway, just a little bit of background. Now let's start moving. This is a translation. It just moves from A to A prime. It's not rotated. It's not reflected. This one is a rotation. It's rotated around this red point here. It's not reflected or translated. It's just moved around there. This one might have been a good example to show the points. Like this is point A on both of them. A and A, B, B prime, C rotates around there to C prime, D rotates around there to D prime. That's a good example where I probably should have labeled those points. So I apologize for that. There's the point that they would rotate around. This one is a clear example of a reflection. The object was reflected over this horizontal line. It wasn't rotated or translated, and the corresponding points would be pretty clear on that. Now we're going to look at multiple transformations. So which two transformations would you have to use? With this one, you would use reflection and translation. So we reflected object A over this line of reflection and then moved it over there. So this is just practicing with using two transformations. We reflected it and then translated it. And our second example, which transformations would be used with these two figures? With this one, we would have to rotate it and then reflect it. So I would rotate it around the center like this, and then reflect it over that line. So you can kind of see the transitionary pieces as we moved it from A to A prime. Now I'm going to use this example where all points are labeled to try and show you an important point when it comes to transformations. So far up to this point, we have been practicing just what does a rotation look like, what does a translation, what does a reflection look like. Now we have to keep in mind each point as we move them. So to be able to move it from here where our points are A, B, C, D, E, F, so we would call that figure A, B, C, D, E, F, to over here where we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and they all have the prime, we would have to do a couple of things. First off, we're going to have to rotate this. And it's important that we rotate, and you'll see why in a second. So let's do it. We would rotate it around a point. I've picked this point outside of the figure. You could also have put this point right in the center and simply rotated it around. And you'll notice that when it rotates, D rotates down here to D prime. E rotates down to E prime. And that's an important distinction. Now we can translate them by moving them over here, and we've got our new figure with all of its points the way that we had originally asked for. This was the points that we had. Those would be the translation or the transformations we would need to use to get them from there to there. Now I'm going to make a subtle change. It's not a big change, but watch what happens when I ask for this transformation. Look. See what I'm doing here? I'm changing the letters. So this was the one that we just did, where we rotated it and then translated it up there. Now I'm going to try and do this one. Now it's going to be a little bit more challenging, or just a little bit different, and it's going to make us think a little bit more about what each transformation does. Okay? So for this one, we are going to need to reflect this object, then translate it. So watch what we have to do. When we put in a line of reflection, a diagonal line of reflection like this, notice what happens with the letters. So when we reflect D to D prime and B to B prime, see what happens? F remains in the middle, C remains kind of at the point of that. A reflects all the way over to here, E reflects to there. So that's different than rotating. When we rotated them down, notice that E stayed there and A stayed here. So that's an important distinction that I think shows better when we label all of the points. We are reflecting this and then moving it up to here so that our letters are now different. See how the letters are different and they reflect what we were asking for at the beginning, which is to have the letters switched. B and D are now D and B. A, E is now EA. And that's an important distinction. So be careful to look at the points on a figure and see where they move, especially when you have figures like this that are symmetrical, because it can throw you off, but if you look at the points, they'll show you exactly which transformations to use. So practice using those transformations, become comfortable with them. Let's take a look at them one more time. Remembering that they are isometric, they're not going to change the shape. We can slide or turn it and flip it. Hope that lesson was helpful for you. Here are your Common Core anchor and your Pennsylvania eligible content. Have a wonderful day.